Welcome, fellow denizens of the dark. This is Lance, your host of Strange Bites, where we sink our teeth into wonderfully weird and wild science discoveries. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. If you enjoy the show, please hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app, leave a quick review, and follow us on social media. Your support truly makes a difference. Now let's dive into today's bite. Today we're heading to Belgium in episode 23. The Outsider's Feast, Horror in the Goyet Cave. It's 45,000 years ago. The world is locked in the grip of the last ice age. Europe is a wild, unforgiving place. Vast forests, freezing winds, and scattered bands of Neanderthals scraping out a living as skilled hunters. They're tough, smart, and tightly knit, but times are getting desperate. Populations are shrinking. Newcomers, early modern humans, are starting to push into the north. Resources are tight. And in the limestone cliffs of Belgium's Meuse Valley, something dark is about to happen inside a cave known today as the Third Cave of Goyet. Firelight flickers on rough walls. A small group of local Neanderthals huddles around the flames. Outside, the night is black and bitter cold. Then, footsteps, dragging, whimpers. They've brought back captives. Not animals, people, outsiders, women and children from a rival band, dragged miles from their own territory. The victims aren't big burly warriors. Science now tells us these were mostly short, lightly built women. Gracile, the experts call it, meaning slimmer and less heavily muscled than the average Neanderthal. There were at least 4 adult or teenage females plus 2 young boys, one a child maybe 6 to 12 years old, the other a tiny neonate, a newborn. Genetic tests on the ancient DNA, basically a high-tech family tree check, showed the women weren't closely related to each other or to the locals who lived near the cave. Chemical fingerprints locked in their bones and teeth, isotopes of carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur, proved they came from a different region entirely. Same diet, same general homeland, but definitely not locals. They were outsiders. What happened next was cold, calculated, and horrifyingly efficient. The captors didn't waste anything. They butchered these people exactly the way they butchered reindeer and horses. Deep cut marks to slice off the meat, heavy blows to crack open the long bones for the rich, fatty marrow inside. The lower legs got special attention. Those were the meatiest, most nutritious parts. Some of the broken bone pieces were even turned into handy little tools, retouchers to sharpen stone blades. Over 100 fragments of these 6 individuals have been found, 101 pieces, all heavily processed. And here's the chilling part. There was plenty of game around. This wasn't desperate starvation cannibalism. It was deliberate, targeted, like these outsiders were simply prey. Fast forward to the 19th century. Belgian archaeologists dig into the Third Cave of Goyet and pull out drawer after drawer of broken bones. They get stored away at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels. For decades, people knew something gruesome happened here. Cut marks, smashed bones, but the story stayed hidden in the fragments. Then, in the last few years, a crack team of scientists, led by researchers from France's CNRS, Université de Bordeaux, decided to look again with modern tools. They used ancient DNA to figure out the sex of each piece. They ran isotope tests to map where these people grew up and what they ate. They digitally rebuilt the shattered long bones on computers, measured their shape and strength, and compared them to other Neanderthals from nearby sites like Spy Cave. What they found blew the lid off the mystery. These weren't random victims. The group was wildly unbalanced, almost all women and kids. The females were noticeably shorter and less rugged than typical Neanderthals, even the local ones. Their leg bones showed they weren't the ultra-tough, long-distance walkers you'd expect from the wandering hunter life. The odds of finding exactly this mix by chance? Basically 0. According to the statistical models the team ran, this was selective, intentional. The paper, published in the Scientific Reports in late 2025, called it highly selective cannibalism and exo-cannibalism, eating outsiders. Not the kind where a family eats its own dead in a ritual. This looks like one group preying on another, maybe to steal territory, maybe to wipe out future rivals by taking the women and children who could keep a rival band alive. In a world where Neanderthal numbers were already dropping and modern humans were showing up, it might have been a brutal survival tactic. Hit the weak links in the enemy chain. The scientists are careful. They can't say for absolute certain if the cannibals were local Neanderthals or even early modern humans passing through. Both groups were in the area around 41,000 to 45,000 years ago. But the evidence leans towards Neanderthals turning on their own kind. And this wasn't the first hint of cannibalism in Neanderthal sites around Europe. But Goyet stands out because of how picky it was. It wasn't random or purely about hunger. It was strategic. So the cave kept it secret for 45,000 years, until modern science cracked it open like one of those marrow-filled bones. And that brings us to the deeper question, the one that lingers long after the fire dies and the cave goes dark. What does this discovery really mean for us? At its core, it forces us to see our own reflections staring back from the Ice Age. Neanderthals weren't cartoonish brutes. They were complex, social, tool-making people with brains as big as ours. They cooperated, cared for their injured, buried their dead with care at other sites. Yet here in the flickering shadows of Goyet, they also chose to hunt, capture, and consume the most vulnerable members of another group, women and children, who represented the future of a rival band. It's a stark reminder that the us versus them instinct runs bone deep in our shared lineage. We modern humans like to think we're evolved beyond that, but history and today's headlines show tribalism, resource wars, and targeted violence against the weak are still with us. Climate stress, population pressure, and competition for land pushes Neanderthals towards the edge of extinction around 40,000 years ago. Sound familiar? We face our own version today, with rising seas, dwindling resources, and geopolitical tensions. Philosophically, this flips the script on what humanity means. If our closest extinct cousins practice calculated brutality, does that make violence an inevitable part of intelligent life? Or does it highlight the choices we have? Neanderthals ultimately disappeared, perhaps outcompeted, absorbed, or simply worn down. We carry a tiny percentage of their DNA in our genomes. Their story is literally inside us. Understanding their dark choices doesn't excuse modern atrocities. It gives us context. It shows how small bands under pressure can slide from survival to savagery. But also that cooperation and empathy were part of their toolkit too. Looking ahead, implications ripple into the future. As archaeology gets better at reading ancient bones and DNA, we'll uncover more uncomfortable truths about our past. That knowledge could help us design societies that resist the outsider trap, stronger international cooperation in the face of global crisis, for example. Or it could warn us, when resources get scarce, the temptation to target the vulnerable never fully goes away. In an era of AI, genetic engineering, and climate migration, we might even face new versions of exo-cannibalism, metaphorical or literal, unless we learn from the cave at Goyet. The bones don't judge. They simply whisper. We were here. We struggled. We choose. Now it's your turn. That's it for today's Bite. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. Drop me a review. Give me a follow on social media. And until next time, stay strange and question everything.